Finished moving yet? Charles, my father-in-law, mutters without looking at me. Though he doesn't call anyone by name, it's clear he's addressing me. It's his usual arrogant tone, thinking he's the only one who matters. I've put up with it until now, but I can't take it anymore. I stop wiping the table and glare at Charles, who isn't even looking at me. I'll be out by today. As I answer, Charles laughs in satisfaction. You really were just a parasite, and trash. I'll feel so refreshed once you're gone. He must be thinking life will return to normal now that things are going his way, oblivious to how much his lifestyle has changed over the years. My name is Grace. I turned 40 this year. I'm married to William and currently living with my in-laws. It's been several years since our marriage, but we don't have children. There's no intention of having children now, and we can't have them anyway. I realized this soon after getting married. I met William at a party, and honestly, if I'd known about his infertility from the start, I might not have married him. I can't have kids. He told me the night we registered our marriage. I felt like I'd fallen into a pit of despair. We had talked about building a bright future together, having maybe 2 kids, wondering what to name them. William even helped pick out names for our future children. All of that was a lie. Well, not exactly a lie. William probably did want kids and had thought about names, despite knowing he couldn't have them. Isn't that the ultimate betrayal? I married him, believing we would build a happy family together. I was completely deceived by William, who I trusted implicitly. Some people might have divorced immediately upon learning such a truth, but divorce isn't that simple for me. I had already vowed to become a family with the in-laws, and they are the only ones we can call parents. I couldn't just report to them that we're divorcing a day after becoming a family. However, living with the in-laws, the inevitable question was when we would have children. So we decided to tell them immediately. Of course, we didn't blame William. We said it was due to a female issue on my part. When they learned we couldn't have children, the in-laws were furious. A useless woman who can't bear children should leave this house immediately. Father-in-law Charles naturally tried to kick me out and treated me like a servant from then on. From the moment I entered the in-laws' house, I was never treated with dignity, always less than human. I always ate alone in the kitchen. I was the leftover disposal crew after the in-laws finished their meal. No matter how delicious the food I made, all I got were the scraps left by the in-laws and William. I've never had a satisfying meal since getting married. My weight kept dropping, and 6 months into the marriage, my wrist bones were protruding. Before, mother-in-law Madison was Charles's target, but it shifted to me after I joined the family. Madison seemed relieved by this. Mom's been smiling a lot more lately. And I remember William once saying, because she's no longer the target, Madison must feel relieved enough to smile more. Of course, she never smiles around Charles, but I've noticed she does when talking with William. Charles' tyranny doesn't stop there. Once he knew we couldn't have children, he ordered me to work from dawn to dusk. Since you're lacking as a woman, at least be useful as a person in this house. I'd always planned to work even after marriage, and I didn't want to stay in this house any longer than necessary. Getting up early to do chores, sending everyone off, then going to work was tough, but having a job with flexible hours helped. Adjusting my return time to get home before everyone else was a plus. Even if I got home early and did chores, I never ate with everyone or received compliments for my cooking. Charles, in particular, would often throw away my food without tasting it. It looks bad. Neither William nor Madison ever complained or said anything else about it. Even if I complained from the kitchen, there were hardly any conversations during meals. I wonder if they really enjoy eating in silence, but all I do is watch them quietly. I had no choice but to get along with the in-laws. I pretended to be on good terms and played the role of a dutiful wife. I can't say what the point of all this was, but as someone without parents, divorce seemed too heavy a burden. Then Charles demanded I use all my earnings for the in-laws' house. I intended to contribute some of my salary as living expenses. All of it. But Charles insisted, Such an absurd demand. What's the point of working if I don't know where my earnings go? But protesting wasn't allowed. Charles' decisions were absolute, and opposing him wouldn't improve anything. It was easier to comply, keeping Charles in a good mood, and sparing myself the sight of Madison and William's sad faces. In the end, the main problem in this marriage was Charles. Madison and William weren't much of an issue. Charles was the one who tormented and oppressed me. It seems Madison used to manage the household finances, but it became my duty after marriage. Madison, "Isn't it too much for Grace?" suggested to Charles. "Shut up!" I was dismissed as such. In Charles's eyes, Madison and I are no different. Being women, we're seen as worthless and not allowed to have opinions. I took over the household ledger from Madison. When I first saw it, I almost fainted. But now, after several years, I've gotten used to it. Perhaps because there's one more breadwinner, Charles started spending more recklessly than before I came. "Because it's for work," he said, increasing his nights out, and the three of them, excluding me, started going on trips during long weekends. They never did such things before, but suddenly things changed. He still doesn't treat me as family, calling me a parasite or trash. I'm just a housekeeper who costs nothing. In my 20s and 30s, I didn't mind much, even thinking it was peaceful when Charles wasn't home. But as I approached 40, I couldn't tolerate Charles's behavior anymore. Listening to him and silently obeying seemed foolish and bothersome. I lost my fear of Charles and started talking back. He didn't like that, and gradually began to resent me. The negative loop continued to worsen, and recently my relationship with Charles had become extremely strained, with almost no conversation between us. Whenever Charles did speak, it was only to badmouth me. I would retort in kind, making the atmosphere at home dreadful. It had escalated to the point where he was telling me to leave the house, but I wouldn't stay quiet when told to leave. "Where do you expect me to go, knowing I have no parents?" I'd snap back. Every time, Charles would slam his glass onto the table in anger. He'd broken so many glasses this way that I lost count. "Why should I have to think about that? A woman like you shouldn't talk back to me." Madison and William would quickly leave the room, sensing another outburst. Once it got to this point, it was Charles's show. "You don't appreciate that you're allowed to stay in this house. Don't get too high and mighty, you parasite." He would start complaining, face redder than when drunk. We've had this conversation hundreds of times. I was tired of being yelled at. Usually, I would give in and apologize. "I'm sorry." But that day was different. "You better stop saying things like that. Charles, you're not getting any younger. You should start calming down." I was in a bad mood too, and retorted sharply. Charles, not expecting me to talk back like this, was furious. "Who do you think you're talking to? I am the master of this house. A wife like you shouldn't have opinions." I knew I had crossed the line, but I couldn't stop myself. "I've been his wife for years. Isn't it time I'm treated like a human? You're retired now, with less salary. Looks like the tables are turning." Once I started, I couldn't stop. With all the built-up frustration, I confronted Charles head-on. He escalated too, eventually grabbing me by the collar. "A person like you isn't needed in my house. I don't want to see your face anymore. Pack your things and leave right now." He yelled so loud that the furniture shook, pushing me away. I should have apologized right there, but I couldn't hold back anymore. "Fine, you want me to leave? That'll make you happy, right?" Charles, looking down on me. "Yes," spat out. Unable to stay silent, "Then I'll do it," I said. He stormed off to his room with a loud noise, and I, a bit calmer, started cleaning the living room Charles had dirtied. Madison came to check on me with a worried look, but left without saying anything, returning to her room. I had no place in this house anymore. Neither William nor Madison would protect me. Years of endurance exploded, making me feel even more isolated. The next day, as usual, I got up early and started my routine. Charles woke up and came into the living room. He sat on the sofa, leaning back and spreading the newspaper, without even glancing at me. Then he asked, without looking, "Finished moving yet?" There was no way I could have moved out so soon after yesterday's events. I didn't even think he was serious. I thought it was just a drunken outburst, not something he meant. "This was about leaving the house, right? When will you leave? You have no right to live here anymore." Even as he spoke, Charles never looked at me. I stopped wiping the table and turned to face Charles. If he's serious about wanting me to leave, then I'll respond seriously. "I'll be out by today." Madison, who was listening nearby, freezes, her worried gaze falling on me. It's clear that once I leave, Madison will become the target again, and she doesn't want me to go. But Charles insists, "Leave." So I have no choice. More precisely, the option to apologize and continue living here was never there. Charles laughs loudly, likely satisfied that he's getting his way. I rush out of the living room, quickly pack my things, and leave the in-laws' house. I haven't decided where to go, but I feel liberated. I send a message to William, who is already out. "Please divorce me. A lawyer will contact you." Then I turn off my phone. Over the next few days, I find a lawyer and have them contact William and the in-laws. Charles, thinking divorce was inevitable, pressured William into signing the divorce papers quickly. William kept looking between me and the divorce papers, but there was no room for second thoughts. Charles was insisting, and I had no intention of returning. "I don't have money to give to a woman like you, but dealing with lawyers is a hassle, so I'll pay." Charles grumbles, not even paying with his own money, but arrogantly looking down on me. The lawyer smiles wryly at this. William seems reluctant to pay, but signs the agreement under Charles's glare. I sign in front of the lawyer, and the divorce is finalized. We complete the distribution of property, and I can claim a settlement for Charles's harassment I had recorded. It was worth paying for a lawyer instead of fighting alone. Charles, caring about his public image, avoids any complications by involving lawyers. I managed the household finances, so I knew exactly how much money Charles had. That's why I was able to suggest an amount he could just about afford. With the property distribution and harassment settlement paid in full, I started a comfortable life in my apartment. I used to hate being alone before marriage, but after living with the in-laws and getting divorced, I've come to cherish my own time. I cook meals for myself, enjoying the peace without anyone complaining. One day, about 3 months after the divorce, Charles calls repeatedly. Assuming it's nothing good, I don't answer, but he's persistent. While fiddling with my phone, I accidentally answer. "What have you done to my house?" I instinctively move the phone away from my ear. His voice is so loud, even without speaker mode. "What do you mean? I haven't done anything. I just left the house like you said." But Charles isn't satisfied with my answer and continues yelling. "How can you say you've done nothing? Why am I getting notifications that withdrawals can't be made since you left?" So he's upset because he's been notified about issues with withdrawals and thinks it's my fault. I don't know. I didn't add anything. I managed everything as you instructed and paid everything due. I start to enjoy realizing why Charles is angry. My grin widens, glad he's not here to see it. "That's impossible! Before you came, we managed with mine, Madison's, and William's salaries. How much were you earning anyway?" I remember I never showed Charles my salary details. $4,500 take home. Charles makes a sound like a squashed frog and then falls silent. In fact, my job is in sales at an investment trust company. Most of my salary was commission-based, dependent on how much return I could generate for investors. But much of it vanished due to Charles's extravagant spending. However, I had invested the inheritance from my parents, which brought in some income. It wasn't much, but it helped with living expenses. I used that income to buy things I needed. But the distribution of property only involved William's savings. This was because only the shared property acquired during our marriage was eligible. So the inheritance from my parents and its earnings were not part of the distribution. Since I had used all earnings during the marriage for living expenses, I had no savings. These years, the Charles family spent money like water, without knowing I was compensating for it. You said you managed before our marriage, but was it the same standard of living? As I pressed on, Charles finally began to get angry. Don't joke! Then keep contributing money to our house! You're the one who ruined it, so you should take responsibility. I couldn't help but laugh at Charles's absurd words. I could see Charles's face turning red and yelling, "What's wrong? What are you talking about? You told me to leave, remember? I did just that. Why should I, no longer a family member, give you money?" I answered half laughing, and then heard something break on the other end. Charles must have thrown another tantrum. The thought that I no longer needed to clean up after him made me even wish he would break more. Besides, we're strangers now, not family, not anything. Please, don't act like family now. Manage your own finances. I left you just enough to live, right? With that, I said goodbye and hung up. I expected more calls, but none came. I thought maybe he was remorseful, but apparently that wasn't the case. Perhaps he felt ashamed of not being able to make payments, ordering William and Madison to borrow money from financial institutions to cover the costs. Payments were made, but it led to debt repayments. Unwilling to change their lifestyle, they continued living as when I was there. If you live like that, you won't be able to make regular payments or repay your debts. Unable to meet regular payments and debt repayments, they accumulated more debt every month. I heard about this when William contacted me, pathetically considering reconciliation. Moreover, William, "I'm cutting ties with Dad, so let's get back together." They even say that. How can he say that now when he never stood up for me against Charles's harassment? I chose to stay with William even knowing we couldn't have children, but he never protected me. I have no intention of returning to him. He might have felt suffocated by Charles, but that's no longer my concern. I wish they realized the extent of their actions and suffer. Now, the in-laws are struggling with debt, but can't reduce their lifestyle standards. Charles, now a contract worker with a reduced salary, and Madison and William have started part-time security jobs. It's not just Charles, it's Madison and William too. Despite being at their limit, they won't lower their living standards. I used to be desperate to protect William, but now I live for myself. At 40, having children might be difficult, but I'm open to the possibility. Before the divorce, waking up was a chore, but now I wake up feeling refreshed. I look forward to a better future in my new life.